Hello class, my name is Elvis Morani. I'm from BRE 120 Real Estate Appraisal, and here is my student speech. The chapter that I was given was on Chapter 8, which is the cost approach to value. This chapter covers the concepts and basics of the cost approach, the application of the cost approach, the estimating cost, the cost estimating techniques such as the comparative unit method, how to estimate and define depreciation, the types of depreciation there are, as I found out later on, there are 3 types, the methods of estimating depreciation, and a uniform residential appraisal report that we use in our student activities. This is what the chapter covers in detail, how to do the cost approach to value. And the first concept that I learned about was the cost approach. The cost approach method is an orderly process which assumes that the value of improved property is indicated on different factors, such as the value of the site, plus the cost, especially new, to construct new improvements. And this is taken with less any depreciation from any cause that improvements have suffered. This is the first that I learned, the cost approach. The second one that I learned was depreciation. And depreciation is a difference in value between the cost, which is new, of the improvements that are available with the current value, regardless of the reasons for the difference. In a cost approach, the cost is related to value by the formula that was given. For instance, value is equal to cost minus depreciation. And it's good to know because in relation to that, when you take a property value by the cost approach, you must check or research the reproduction or replacement cost of improvements of the subject property, the depreciation of improvements, and land value. So basically where it's determined separately. So property value is equal to reproduction or replacement cost of improvements minus depreciation of improvements plus land value. And that's the definition or basics of the cost approach. The last thing I learned from that was that the cost approach to value is a best approach for service types of buildings where there are few comparables and the income is not appropriate to be used to calculate. So that's the first thing I learned, the basics to cost approach and depreciation. The second one that I learned was in regards to the cost approach was cost estimating techniques. When you're using cost estimating techniques, cost estimating can be complex, but in theory, as I read the book, they actually break it down to simple concepts. For instance, cost can be equal to the number of units times cost per unit based on unit cost of the property. And one thing that or method that I've learned with cost estimating techniques is the comparative unit method. So with a comparative unit method is basically you have square footage of the property is calculated by measuring and multiplying the outside dimensions, length times width of the building. And this is where you break it down into rectangles and triangles. And a cost per square footage is obtained by multiplying the square footage by estimated cost per square foot. And you use this comparative unit method to estimate the cost. And I found it really cool that he showed us how to do it. So that's the second thing I learned was the cost estimating techniques. And the third topic that I learned from this chapter was the sales comparison method. Now, what the sales comparison method is actually a method of estimating depreciation. And by properly estimating depreciation is actually the most difficult part of the cost approach. Because many properties suffer from several different types and causes of depreciation. Like there's different methods. For instance, one of them is economic age life method, which takes into account the property's age, the sales comparison method the capitalization method, the cost to cure the property method, and observed condition method. So one reason why it's so tough to calculate or estimate depreciation is that there's different methods for different types of properties. Depends on the property you have. For example, if you have a poor condition, you might have to do observed condition. Or if you want to do sales comparison method based on comparables, you can. It just depends on the property in question. That's why it's hard. But the one that I want to focus on, the final concept, is the sales comparison method. So this is when, for instance, you have adequate data available for a subject property, is that sales comparison is a useful tool for measuring depreciation. It's one of them. In order to use the sales comparison method, the appraiser must be able to identify comparable properties in the area that have the same defect, preferably, as a subject property, the same defect, and other comparable properties that do not have a defect. So you have a group that has the same defect as a subject property, such as poor flooring, and one that doesn't, so say that they have better flooring. The difference in selling prices between the two sets of data or comparable sales represents the amount of depreciation. And this way you can calculate the depreciation value and use it for your cost method. This is pretty much an example of using paired data and analysis, which was a way to help calculate depreciation and help calculate the cost approach to value, estimate the cost. So this is the third method that I learned in this real estate chapter. Chapter 8, cost approach to value. So I want you to recap. The first method that I learned was the cost method, or a cost approach to value. This is where originally I learned the cost approach method, the importance of depreciation, how to calculate the property value, and value in general, which is cost minus depreciation, which is important to know. The second method that I learned was the comparative unit method, which is a cost estimating technique. There are different cost estimating techniques, but I want you to focus on comparative unit method because I like the method how to cost per square footage. And how by measuring the square feet or square footage and doing multiplying cost per square foot, you get to calculate in this way comparative unit method to help calculate the cost estimate, which I think is pretty cool because I didn't know that was available. So, and my last topic was the sales comparison method, which is what you basically have a subject property. You look for properties with same defects, one without. You minus the difference between the two, and then you got your depreciation, which helps with the cost approach to value method. So the first one I learned was the cost method. The second one was how to approach or to estimate the cost estimating techniques. The second one is comparative unit method. And the third one is a sales comparison approach to calculate depreciation. And those are 3 topics that I learned. The basics of the cost approach, which includes depreciation and value, how to calculate cost. One example was the comparative unit method. And the third one is how to calculate depreciation using sales comparison method. I've learned that through this chapter, the cost approach is basically a way which assumes a value of improved property, indicated by value site, minus any cost or defects of the improvements. And that value is cost minus depreciation. Also, in comparative unit method is a way of helping estimate the cost. And the third one is how to calculate depreciation, one of the methods. Those are what I learned in the chapter. And this chapter is chapter 8, cost approach to value, which is important, defining an appraisal and uniform residential appraisal report. It's important to know how to do cost approach to value. As we've seen before in the form activities, it is there. That's my conclusion. And my name is Elvis Morani. This is my student speech. Thank you for your time, and I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you.